Like so, this is kind of like almost like a indent in the stone. And we could do the same along here as well. Just another kind of little bit there. And what this does is it gives us that that variation, because you don't want it to repeat, not when you're using the texture. If you were reusing the same bit of texture, obviously it's going to repeat, but if you're using the same bit of texture on the actual texture, that's just a it's kind of waste of resource. Okay, so I'm just going to rotate this again 90 degrees. Again, pick my colour up here. This time I might just do an indent down here. Again, just paint round, form that. Again, a nice large one here, a bit more obvious this time. Remember to multiple undo. If you hold Control Alt and Z, you'll notice that keeps undoing. Whereas if you just do Control Z, it just undoes the last step. So I'm making a bit of a mess of that. Just revert back to colour picking from here rather than trying to colour pick off the image. Okay, so just one more to do. So again, rotate this. There are other ways to get variation as well, by the way. We are going to add variation in this using some other techniques, but I do like to do this one initially as well. Okay, so now we actually have some variation in that. So let's make another new layer and rotate our image back to how it was originally. I'm just going to turn on this underlayer here because that adds that extra kind of layer of colour. Okay, so the next thing to do then is to look at the actual kind of edge stuff on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some highlights in each kind of corner kind of around here. So to start with, we're going to select this and we're going to start with a kind of small brush and then gradually kind of fade that out. In fact, I might make that a little bit bigger. Let's start with big details, we can always take them out. We'll do our vertical line first, and again we're just going to work on one side here. There's no point doing extra work when we don't need to. We can just tweak this afterwards, and I'm just following the same process of kind of colour picking as I go along. But this time from the high one. I should be able to take this out now actually, because I can use the line I painted as a guide. One thing I'm going to do quickly here is just use this default colour here just to paint out kind of some of this. Then I'm going to go to my eraser tool, put my size right down, keep my hardness reasonably high. I'm just going to paint out. I also need to lower the opacity down, the hardness down again. I'm just going to paint out some of these lines here. Then go back to, go back to my brush tool. It's just B on the keyboard, by the way, if you want to go to brush. And I'm going to make my line smaller again. And what I'm looking to do is actually just get some slightly defined shape to this. So you can see it's actually more of a line now rather than a just like a random splodge. The other thing I want to do is start painting a line down here as well. And we're also going to take a line this way too, obviously. So I'm not too happy with some of this, so what I'm going to do is just take this like this way, and that should be right actually. So I feel like we need a bit more kind of definition in that line. So you can see how I'm kind of arcing it a little bit. I'll take that way. And I might leave that actually, I quite like the way that's going. Okay, so now of course we can colour pick on this. We get that slightly darker grey. And we can start to pad that a bit so the highlight actually feels like it's from stone. Because if it's too bright, it'll kind of feel like a highlight from a metal object rather than a stone object. So I might just kind of colour pick around there and expand on this. Each bit that sticks out, I'm just expanding a little bit on it, giving it some extra shape. So obviously also on stone, you tend to find the highlight will blur out a little bit more as well. Okay, so once you're kind of happy with where you're going with that, the next thing you want to do is actually kind of shade it slightly. So if we add another new layer in, let's just call this top highlight, and then we'll call this one top shade. So we're going to select like a darker colour like this, and literally just going to go in and just add some shading, because you've got to think if there's a highlight from an edge there, it's also going to pick up a little bit of shadow as well. So I might just decrease my hardness a little bit for this. And just paint that in like so. What else I might do is just go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and just blur this a little bit. And then what you want to do is change it to multiply and bring the opacity down a little bit as well. And for our top highlight, we'll change that to lighten. Okay, so one last thing I want to do here is say select this here. I'm just going to expand out some of this kind of area around here. As I said before, just to give it more of a kind of stony type highlight. Okay, so I probably have jumped ahead of myself a little bit there. I probably should have painted that centre bit first, but no matter. Okay, so let's select both of these, and we'll just duplicate those layers, pull those over to here, and in fact let's just leave that, so I'm just going to delete those actually, because what we need to do next is actually paint this line along here, but rather than copy it, I'm actually going to paint a whole new line, just because, and in fact I'll just paint it straight onto here. So top highlight, and then we will rotate our image, so we're just going to follow the same process again of painting our line. This time we're going to paint the edges straight in. Let's just make sure that roughly follows the edge there, so it does. And then we will work our way down here. And because it's stone, you kind of want that that slightly jagged kind of edge to it as well. Now one thing I'm not going to do this time is paint a highlight in there. The reason I'm not going to do that is because if we've got the light coming in from this kind of direction, so the light's coming in from this direction, you can see, because we've got highlight there, we've got shadow on this side, so it's not really going to occur on this side. I mean, we might get a, we just make sure we're in top shade here, we might get a little bit kind of under here, but other than that I don't envisage it will be very much. Again, I'll just blur that a little bit. Alright, it's because I'm on the wrong layer there, so I need to be on top highlight. Okay, so let's just rotate this back to our original framing here. And what I'm going to do is then select both of these, duplicate the layers, rotate them, turn on my UVs, and just paste these over the top here. Just making sure they line up properly. And we'll duplicate them again. Again, making sure they line up properly. Duplicate one more time. This time flip horizontal. Okay, so we're on our way now to having a stone painted. Obviously, what I'm going to do quick here is just make a group and just put all these in here, because I'm going to need to go in there and actually get some variation in those. Right, so we're going to make another new layer again. And this layer, what we're going to do is paint like the remaining kind of highlight here. So what we'll do is we'll select a colour along the chart, say this one here. We'll make a bigger kind of brush. What we're going to do is just paint a kind of blob colour in the middle here. So we don't need to be that precise yet, hence why we're using a nice big brush. One thing I might do though is just put my hardness back up to say 80%. So basically we're imagining that a lot of people have stepped on this stone, so the center point is a lot more worn than the rest of it. Okay, so we should be able to turn this off, and then once we've done that, what we'll do is shrink the brush by say 3 times, and then we're just going to paint in here again, and just start getting that down, 'cause it's definitely too bright at the moment. So this should gradually create our gradient for this center kind of area. So now I'm selecting on the outer colour. I'm going to bring that in because it's definitely too big around here at the moment. Okay, so we're getting some of that. Again, I'm going to shrink the brush size down again. And again, I'm going to work my way from the outside inwards. Okay, so you can see where we're going with this. Starting to get a kind of rough gradient going on here. And again, I'm just going to do one more pass, I think, just to get rid of some of that obvious stepping. You can see. Remember to lower your brush size down as well. I think I'm just going to bring this bit in a little bit as well, just to make it a little bit more even. And so by the time you finish, you should end up with working from a really small brush and not have any kind of really kind of obvious stepping in your gradients, but a nice kind of shape to it regardless. Okay, so there's our kind of center point. So let's add another new layer here. What we're going to do now is just start kind of fixing up some of these edges that we've already started. So that one, it's got a less kind of variation than this one, and also with this side we're going to need the highlights changing on some of these as well. So I'm just going to use the default colour just to paint some of these down a bit. And then what we're going to do is select our white colour again, go to a smaller brush, make a new layer here, and just get that variation in there.